She fell on the steps. Not dramatically. Not in a way that anyone could later describe as an accident they could not have prevented. She fell because the cardboard box was too wide for her arms, and the security guard behind her was moving too fast, and the edge of the bottom step caught the front of her heel at the exact moment. She shifted the box to get a better grip, and then she was down. The box hit the ground first. It split open at the corner, and everything came out. Her mother's photograph skidded across the pavement face down. Her spare glasses case cracked against the bottom step. The small folded square of Angolan print fabric she had kept under her keyboard since her first week at this company. The one that made the desk feel like somewhere she belonged, landed in a puddle left over from the morning's rain and sat there soaking. A coffee mug shattered. Sophia was on one knee on the steps of the building she had worked in for 4 years, in her best black blazer, in front of everyone. The entrance area was busy. It was 2:40 on a Tuesday afternoon. There were people coming in, people going out, a courier waiting near the door, 2 visitors seated in the lobby visible through the glass. Every single one of them saw it happen, and every single one of them did what people do when they witness the humiliation of someone they do not want to be associated with. They looked, and then they found somewhere else to look, very quickly, as if the looking itself was a thing they needed to unsee. Nobody moved to help her. Not the security guard who had been walking too close behind her. He took 1 step back and stood there, hands clasped in front of him, waiting with the patient professionalism of a man whose job was to make sure she left the building, not to make sure she was all right. Not the colleague from the 3rd floor who was coming out of the door at exactly that moment and had to step around the scattered items to avoid them. He looked at the cracked glasses case on the pavement, and then at Sophia on one knee, and then he kept walking. Not the courier, not the visitors through the glass. Nobody. Sophia picked up her mother's photograph first. She turned it over. The glass in the frame had cracked, a single diagonal line from corner to corner, but the photograph itself was unharmed. Her mother's face looked up at her from behind the cracked glass, and something about that specific image, her mother's expression, steady and unsmiling and completely certain, exactly the way Esperanza had always looked when the world was being difficult and she was deciding not to care, made Sophia breathe. She gathered everything back into the box with her hands. The broken mug she left. There was no way to carry broken pieces of ceramic, and she was not going to cut herself on the pavement steps of a building that had just fired her. She collected the glasses case, the fabric, the charging cable that had unspooled across 2 steps, the notebook with 3 pages used. She put them in the damaged box, and she pressed the split corner together with her palm, and she stood up. Her knee was sore. Her blazer had a faint mark on it from the step. Her hair, which she had spent 20 minutes on that morning, long, voluminous curls parted deeply to one side and falling over her left shoulder, had fallen partly across her face when she went down, and she did not have a free hand to push it back. She stood on the steps of that building with the box pressed against her chest and her hair across her face, and she looked straight ahead. That was when she felt it, a specific weight, coming from above. The particular sensation of being watched by someone who is not trying to hide the fact that they are watching. Her eyes moved up to the 4th floor windows. She did not mean to look. It was involuntary, the way pain makes you look at the source. Park Soo-jin was standing at the glass. Her arms were crossed loosely. Her posture was relaxed. If anyone inside the office had glanced at her, they would have seen a colleague taking a moment to look out the window. Nothing more, nothing suspicious. But Sophia was not inside the office. Sophia was on the steps below, with a broken box and a cracked photograph frame and a sore knee, and from this angle she could see Soo-jin's expression with complete clarity. Satisfaction. Quiet, settled, and total. The expression of someone watching the ending of something they built. Sophia held her gaze for 3 full seconds. She did not look away first. She did not drop her eyes, or turn her head, or give Soo-jin the additional victory of making her flinch. Then she turned and walked down the remaining steps and out onto the pavement, and she did not look back. She walked with her spine straight and the damaged box against her chest, and her hair still partly across her face because she still did not have a free hand, and the city moved around her with complete indifference, and she kept walking until the building was behind her and she could not feel those 4th floor eyes anymore. She walked half a block. Then she stopped. She stood on the pavement and she breathed. Just breathed. in the specific way you breathe when something enormous has just finished happening and your body is still catching up to the fact that it is over. Then she reached up with one hand and pushed her hair out of her face. She adjusted the box. She checked that her mother's photograph was still on top. It was. She kept walking. What had brought her to those steps? What had happened in that building in the 3 hours before the fall? Was this. Sophia had spent 3.5 weeks building a quarterly performance analysis from raw finance data. 14 people in the conference room. Department heads, senior managers, 2 executive board members. She had verified every number 3 times. She had prepared for every possible question. She was ready. Then the slide changed on its own, and the numbers on the screen were not her numbers. The revenue figures had been inflated. The growth rates doubled. The cost estimates cut in half. Every figure that mattered altered with the specific intelligence of someone who understood exactly which numbers would make the right people raise the right eyebrows. Before she could turn around, Park Soo-jin was already on her feet with a printed audit log in her hand, telling the room that the alterations had been made from Sophia's workstation at 11:47 the previous night. The room decided in under 60 seconds. She could see it happening. The faces closing, the conclusions forming, the particular quality of silence that means a verdict has already been reached before the defense has finished speaking. She told them clearly that she had left at 7:15, that someone had used her credentials, that access and authorship were not the same thing. A board member asked if her screen had been locked. She remembered the call from building security, the distraction, the quick grab of her bag. She could not say yes with absolute certainty, and that half-second hesitation was all 14 people needed. Director Yoon, very quietly, asked her to wait in her office. She waited 37 minutes. Then HR arrived with a box that had been prepared before the presentation ended, and paperwork that had been signed before she ever stood up to defend herself. Someone had arranged the ending before the story began. She understood that now, walking home with the broken box. This had not been spontaneous. This had been constructed. The altered numbers, the printed audit log ready in Soo-jin's folder, the termination paperwork already signed. Every piece of it placed in advance. Every exit sealed before she walked into that room. Someone had wanted her gone, and they had been thorough about it. Sophia reached her building, climbed the stairs, unlocked her door, and set the box on her kitchen table. She stood there for a moment looking at it. Then she put the kettle on, because the kettle was something she could control, and right now she needed one thing she could control. She was going to get back up. She just needed a minute first. If you believe love should be fought for, protected, and sometimes tested by fire, then this story is for you. Subscribe to this channel for more powerful Afro-Korean love stories filled with passion, betrayal, loyalty, and unexpected twists. The next story might be even more intense than this one. Like this video, comment your country, and share it with someone who believes in ride or die love. Let's build a global community that understands that real love has no borders. And before you go, I have a special request for you. Comment a name you would love to see featured in my next story. It could be your name, an African name, or even a Korean name you love. Who knows? Your name might become the next powerful character in one of my stories. The months that followed were the quietest of Sophia's adult life. She had savings. Years of careful, disciplined saving. The habit of a woman who had grown up watching her parents budget everything down to the last Kwanzaa before the month ended. She could survive without income for close to a year if she was careful, and she was always careful. So she did not panic. She did not spiral. She sat with the humiliation quietly, the way you sit with a fever, miserable, waiting for it to break, doing small necessary things in the meantime. She cleaned her apartment from top to bottom. She cooked real meals instead of the quick office desk lunches she had been eating for 3 years. She called her mother in Luanda twice a week and did not tell her what had happened because her mother would worry herself sick, and there was nothing her mother could do from 5,000 kilometers away. She went for walks in the morning. She read books she had bought 2 years ago and never opened. But the humiliation was a living thing. It sat in her chest like a coal, not burning, just present. Heavy. She had done nothing wrong. She knew it with the kind of certainty that required no evidence. The way you know your own handwriting or the sound of your own voice. She had not touched those numbers. She had not manipulated anything. She had spent 3.5 weeks building a report that was honest and thorough and professional, and someone had deliberately dismantled it and used it to destroy her. And not one person in that room had given her even 5 minutes of real doubt. That was the part that refused to leave. Not the firing. Not the box. Not the escort through the building. It was the faces. 14 faces, and not one of them had looked at her. A woman who had worked in that building for 4 years, who had stayed late and come in early and covered for sick colleagues without being asked. Not one of them had looked at her with the basic decency of genuine uncertainty. They had all decided before she finished speaking. She thought about that for a long time. In the 5th week, a friend sent her a link. Not a close friend. A former university colleague named Adiz who lived nearby and periodically remembered Sophia existed long enough to send her things in Messenger. The link was for something called the Horizon Club, an exclusive professional social and matchmaking organization, described in careful, understated language on its website. Curated monthly events for accomplished individuals, discreet, membership by invitation only. Its most famous gathering was something called the Ivory Masquerade, a formal masked ball held 4 times a year at rotating premium venues across the city. Adiz's message said only, "You need to get out of your apartment and stop marinating in your feelings. I went last quarter. Just go. It's not weird, I promise." Sophia stared at the link for 6 days. Then she paid the membership fee. She told herself it was not about love. It was not even about people. It was about doing something that had no connection to work, no connection to the last 4 years of her life, no connection to anything that had hurt her. It was about sitting in a room with strangers and being nothing more than a woman in a beautiful dress with a mask on her face. She wore midnight blue. Long, formal, fitted at the waist, the fabric catching light when she moved. Her hair was down, voluminous, richly curled, parted deeply on one side so that it fell in heavy waves over her left shoulder. The mask was silver, covering the upper half of her face, with small blue stones along the edges. She looked in the mirror before she left and barely recognized herself. Good, she thought. That was exactly the point. The venue was a converted heritage building in the city center. All high ceilings and candlelight and live chamber music from a string quartet in the far corner. Guests moved through the rooms in pairs and small groups. Their identities dissolved behind feathers and sequins and painted silk. The effect was genuinely strange, intimate and anonymous simultaneously. Sophia accepted a glass of champagne from a passing tray and moved slowly through the crowd, listening more than speaking, watching the way strangers became easy with each other when none of the usual social measurements applied. She was standing near the tall windows that overlooked the city when he appeared beside her. Not with urgency, not dramatically. He simply materialized at a comfortable distance, as though he had been approaching for a while and had chosen the exact right moment to stop. He was tall. That was the first thing. Tall and still, and dressed in a black suit that had clearly been made for him, because it fit too precisely to have been bought off any rack. His mask was black with gold detail, covering the area from his forehead to just below the bridge of his nose. What was visible below it was a jawline, so clean it looked architectural. A composed, symmetrical face. Hooded eyes that held something she could not immediately categorize. Awareness, she decided eventually. An awareness that was slower and more complete than normal social attention. "You've been watching that window for 20 minutes, he said. Not accusatory. Mildly observational, with a small thread of amusement underneath. Sophia glanced at him. "I like the view. It's the same view from every window in this room. I like this particular angle." A pause. He looked at the window, then back at her. "Fair enough." He said it with the faint beginning of a smile, and something in the honesty of the concession made her relax slightly. Most people at events like this pushed. He had simply accepted. His name was Kang Jae-Hyun, he told her about an hour later, after they had moved through 3 separate conversations. The city view, then the music the quartet was playing, then something she said about the strange social mathematics of anonymous spaces. He said his name with the unembellished directness of someone who was not accustomed to performing himself for an audience. She gave him hers. "Just Sophia." "Just Sophia," she confirmed. They talked for the rest of the evening. Not constantly. There were comfortable silences between them, the kind that don't need filling. He asked her real questions and listened to the real answers. She asked him things and he answered without deflection, but also without the self-promotional texture of a man at a networking event. At some point the quartet began playing something slower, and people drifted toward the center of the room. And Sophia noticed that she and Kang Jae-Hyun had gradually moved slightly apart from the main gathering, as if by a mutual gravitational agreement neither of them had consciously made. Neither of them removed their masks. That was part of the event's design, she knew. Guests were encouraged to keep masks on for the duration of the ball, to protect the principle of connection before identity. But she noticed that he did not push it, did not test the boundary with a joke or a suggestion or even a meaningful look at the edge of her mask. He simply talked to her as a person, and she had forgotten, in 5 weeks of mostly solitude, what that felt like. When the evening ended, they exchanged contact information through the matchmaking platform's messaging system. No phone numbers. No social media. No photographs. "I'll message you," he said. "I might reply," she answered, his almost smile again, just at the corner of his mouth. She thought about that almost smile the whole drive home. He messaged her the next morning, and the morning after that, and in the evenings, and in the small random windows between whatever he was doing and whatever she was doing, a note about something funny he had observed, a question about something she had mentioned at the ball, a response to something she had said the day before that he had apparently continued thinking about after the conversation ended. He was a good writer. Clean sentences, no filler, occasionally dry in a way that made her laugh alone in her apartment and then feel strangely self-conscious about laughing alone in her apartment. She replied. Every time. They went to phone calls after 3 weeks. His voice was low and measured, with the kind of cadence that never seemed hurried regardless of the subject matter. She told him things she had not told anyone. Not the full story of what had happened at work, not yet, but the shape of it. That she had been through something difficult, that it had been a public thing, that she was in a period of rebuilding that she was not entirely sure how to navigate. He did not offer solutions or advice or the kind of optimistic reframing people give when they don't know what else to say. He said, "That sounds exhausting. I'm sorry it happened to you." She had to put the phone down for a moment after that. The weeks became months. The connection between them was unlike anything Sophia had experienced. Not because it was overwhelming or dramatic, but because it was consistent. It showed up every day in small, reliable ways, and she understood slowly and with some alarm that she had begun to count on it. She had begun to count on him, this man she had never seen fully, whose photograph she did not have, whose life she knew in outline but not in detail. She did not examine that too closely. She was not ready to examine it. Then, for months after the night of the masquerade, her phone rang with a number she recognized. The company. She almost declined the call. Her hand moved over the button. Then something stopped her. Not hope exactly, but a kind of professional steadiness that had survived everything they had done to her. And she answered. It was Director Yoon. His voice was different. Careful. A little older sounding than she remembered. "Sophia." A pause. "We owe you an apology. A formal, complete apology. The board completed an independent investigation last week. The data manipulation was traced in full. The edits were made from your workstation, yes, but after your departure that evening, using credentials that were accessed without your knowledge." Another pause. "Park Soo-jin has been terminated. There will be a formal statement. The record will be corrected. And we would like to ask whether you would consider returning to your position, with full restoration of your seniority and a formal acknowledgement to the entire staff of what actually occurred." Sophia was sitting very still. "Who ordered the investigation?" she asked. A brief hesitation. "That came from above my level," Director Yoon said. "The instruction came directly from the chairman's office." The chairman. Sophia had been at that company for 4 years and had never once been in the same room as the chairman. He was a name on a door, a photograph in the lobby, a signature on documents. He was never in the building, always overseas, always managing the international portfolio, always represented by deputies and directors. She thought about that for the rest of the day. Then she called Jae-Hyun. She told him the company had called, that she had been cleared, that they wanted her back. "What do you want?" he asked. "Not. What are you going to do?" "Not. I think you should. What do you want?" She looked at her hands in her lap. "I built things there," she said quietly. "Things I'm proud of. And I left with everyone thinking I was a fraud. I want them to know that I wasn't. Then go back," he said simply, "and let them see who you actually are." She returned on a Tuesday morning in early spring. The apology was delivered as promised. A formal memo to all staff, precise in its language, clear in its conclusions. People looked at her differently when she walked in. Some with relief, some with the specific guilt of those who had doubted her. Director Yoon met her at the door of her office and shook her hand and said nothing, because there was nothing adequate to say, and she appreciated that he knew it. She settled back into her work with the same discipline that had built her reputation the first time. Her desk, her systems, her pace. She did not make a performance of her return. She simply worked. But there was something new in the building, a presence that had not been there before. For the first 2 weeks, she only sensed it through peripheral information, a rearranged meeting schedule, a new protocol from the executive floor, the way the reception team began moving slightly faster in the mornings. Then Director Yoon announced it formally. The chairman would be returning to the home office permanently. The international expansion had reached a self-sustaining stage. Kang Jae-Hyun would be on site from the following Monday. Kang. Sophia read the name in the announcement email and felt nothing particular, because it was a common enough name and she had no reason to connect it to anything. Monday morning arrived. She was in the second-floor meeting room, setting up materials for a departmental review. The room had a glass wall that faced the main corridor, and she had her back to it, arranging printed reports in order, when the atmosphere in the corridor changed. She registered it before she understood it, a subtle shift in the sound of the hallway. The kind of shift that happens when someone enters a space and the people in it recalibrate, almost without knowing they are doing it. Footsteps, purposeful ones. The particular rhythm of someone who is accustomed to rooms making way for them. A voice carried through the glass. Just 3 words, directed at an assistant. A confirmation of meeting time. Sophia's hands went still on the papers. The voice. She turned slowly. In the corridor, surrounded by 3 people with tablets, walking with the unhurried control of someone who has never needed to move faster than he chooses to move, was a man she recognized and did not recognize simultaneously. Tall, precise, a jawline that was architecturally clean even through glass. Hooded eyes that scanned the corridor with the slow, complete awareness of someone who never missed anything. He had not yet looked toward the meeting room. Sophia turned back to her papers. Her heart was doing something she refused to name. It is a coincidence, she told herself. It is the same first name, and the voice is similar because voices can be similar, and this is a professional environment, and she was not going to do this. Then the meeting room door opened. He stepped inside ahead of his team, and his eyes moved across the room in that slow sweep, and they landed on her and stopped. Total silence. Half a second. Less. Sophia. The way he said it. The weight of it. Not the name on her employee badge. Not the name in her email signature. The name she had given him. Just Sophia, nothing more. At a ball where no one could see their faces. She looked up. Mr. Kang, she said. Professional. Steady. Giving him nothing. Something moved in his expression. Too fast for anyone else in the room to catch, but she caught it, because she had spent months learning the small languages of his face through a phone screen. Shock. And underneath the shock, something that looked almost like wonder. He sat at the head of the table. She took her seat to the side. The meeting began. For 45 minutes, they were 2 professionals in a conference room. He asked precise questions. She gave precise answers. He looked at her reports and made 3 specific observations that were exactly correct, which was somehow the most disorienting thing that had happened yet. At no point did his expression shift from composed and authoritative. At no point did she allow hers to shift either. But when the meeting ended and the room emptied, and Sophia was gathering her papers to leave, she felt him still standing at the head of the table. Not looking at her. Just present. The data formatting on page 7, he said to the room in general. It's well structured. Clean logic. She did not look up. Thank you, she said. She walked out. She called him that evening. From her personal phone. To the number on the matchmaking platform. Her hands were completely steady when she dialed, which she decided to take as evidence that she was a more functional person than she felt. He picked up on the second ring. I know, he said. Before she could speak. A long pause. You're the chairman, she said. Yes. Of the company where I work. Yes. And you knew, when did you know? At the meeting. When I introduced myself. When you said your name. He paused. I wasn't certain, but I was certain enough. Another silence. This one had texture. I didn't know you worked there, he said. When we met at the masquerade. I didn't know anything about you except what you told me. That's the truth. I know. And she did know. She had no reason to doubt it, and she was a person who trusted her own instincts. But it's still complicated, he said. Yes. She exhaled. What do we do with this? He didn't answer immediately. When he did, it was with the same directness that had characterized every conversation they had ever had. I don't want to stop talking to you, he said. But I won't push. Whatever you decide, I'll respect it. You have my word. She sat with that for 3 days. On the 4th day, she messaged him through the platform. She wrote, I don't want to stop either, but I need us to be careful. He replied within 4 minutes. Careful, he wrote. Understood. Whatever pace you need. It was not easy. The office was a small ecosystem, dense with observation and social intelligence, and she was acutely aware that being seen as close to the chairman, in any context, would generate exactly the kind of attention she had spent 4 years trying to avoid. She was professional with him in every shared space. Precise, appropriate, technically sharp. She gave him nothing that a camera in the corner could interpret. But their private conversations continued. And in those conversations, something was building. Something that no longer felt like the cautious, pleasant connection they had maintained through the anonymous months of the matchmaking platform. Now there was weight to it. History. The strange layered knowledge of knowing someone both professionally and personally. Seeing the same person across 2 completely different contexts and finding them consistent in both. He was the same man. That was the disorienting thing. The chairman who asked precise questions in meetings, and the man who sent her careful, honest messages at 11:30 at night were not performing 2 different versions of themselves. He was simply himself, completely, in every space. She had never encountered that before, not in a person with that much power. She was sitting in his office for a formal review, just the 2 of them, an end-of-quarter briefing, when she noticed it, on the edge of his desk, half tucked under a leather folder. A printed photograph, the kind from a security system, grainy, time-stamped, taken from an angle above a doorway. It showed her coat, her box, her spine, perfectly straight, walking toward the building exit while the HR escort held the door. She recognized the moment immediately. The worst afternoon of her professional life, captured in a security still. She looked up at him. He had gone very still. You saw it, she said. He didn't look away. Yes. When? The evening it happened. I was reviewing the daily security digest from the home office. He paused. It wasn't flagged. It was just there. A clip from the lobby cameras. And you watched it. I did. She looked at the photograph again. At the rigid line of her own shoulders. At the box she was carrying. Why did you order the investigation? She asked. You didn't know me. I was one employee out of hundreds. Why? He leaned back slightly. He was quiet for a moment in the way that meant he was choosing words for something that mattered. Because of the way you defended yourself, he said finally. In the footage from the conference room, the security camera caught the audio. He paused. You didn't beg. You didn't collapse. You told them exactly what had happened, clearly, without exaggeration, and no one believed you. I watched 14 people in that room decide your guilt before you finished your first sentence. His voice was even, but there was something underneath it. I've seen a lot of professional environments. I've seen a lot of political situations. And I can tell the difference between someone lying in self-preservation and someone telling the truth that no one wants to hear. He looked at her directly. You were telling the truth. It was obvious. And it was obvious that it didn't matter to anyone in that room. And that bothered me more than I expected it to. Sophia was quiet for a long time. You helped me, she said slowly, before we ever met. Yes. And then I walked into a ball and talked to a stranger for 3 hours. The smallest pause. Yes, he said. She looked at him. This man who had watched her worst moment from a screen in another country and believed her without any reason to. Who had sent investigators into a situation that was, technically, none of his direct concern as an absentee chairman reviewing security footage. Who had then, without any knowledge of what he had done, sat beside her at a window overlooking a city and talked to her about music. That's not coincidence, she said. No, he agreed quietly. It isn't. She stood to leave. She picked up her report folder. At the door she paused. Jae-Hyun. His name. Not Mr. Kang. His name in the office for the first time. He looked up. "Thank you," she said, "for believing me when you had no reason to." She closed the door behind her. For 2 weeks after that, things between them were charged in a way that was almost unbearable. Not because anything had happened, nothing had happened, but because they were both now fully aware that something was happening, and they were both, with deliberate professionalism, choosing not to accelerate it. He did not reach across any lines at work. He was scrupulously correct in every shared space, perhaps slightly more formal with her than with other senior staff, which she recognized as a form of care. The same way a very careful person holds a fragile thing at a slightly greater distance than everything else, not because they value it less, but because they know what they are holding. She appreciated it so much she could not look at him directly for 3 days. Then Park Soo-jin came back. Not to the building. She had been terminated, her access revoked, her name removed from the company directory. But she came back the way people like her always came back. Indirectly. Through the things she had left behind. It started with an anonymous message sent to 3 members of the board through a private communications channel. The message claimed that Sophia had been reinstated not because of genuine innocence, but because she had formed a personal relationship with the chairman during the investigation period. That the clearing of her record was not the result of honest fact-finding, but of personal bias. The message was vicious in its precision. It named the Orison Club. It mentioned a masked ball. It did not have details. It could not have details because the platform was encrypted and membership was private, but it had enough shape to be dangerous. Sophia found out from Director Yoon, who came to her office on a Thursday afternoon and closed the door and told her with the expression of a man delivering news he genuinely hated. She listened to the whole thing without interrupting. When he finished, she said, "Is the board treating it as credible?" "2 members are taking it seriously," he said carefully. "The other 4 are waiting for a response." She nodded. "Thank you for telling me." After he left, she sat for a long time. Then she called Jae-Hyun. He was already aware. Of course he was. He had received a separate copy of the message, delivered to his personal executive inbox. "This isn't Soo-jin operating alone," she said. "She couldn't have known about the club. Our membership was private. Someone gave her that." "I know," he said. "I've already started tracing it." A pause. "Jae-Hyun." She kept her voice very level. "Someone paid her to frame me. You know that. The investigation found the payment trail, but the source was never identified. Do you think this is connected?" A longer pause this time. "Yes," he said. "I do. Who would want me specifically gone from that company badly enough to pay for it?" The silence that followed was the kind she had learned to read. Not avoidance, but the sound of someone deciding how much truth to give at once. "I need a few more days," he said. "There are some things I need to confirm before I tell you what I think is happening." "Jae-Hyun, please. Quiet. Direct. A few days. I'm not keeping this from you to protect myself. I'm keeping it because if I'm right, I need to be certain before I tell you, because what I suspect is going to change the way you see several things, and I need to be sure before I do that." She wanted to push. She did not push. 2 days, she said. 2 days, he agreed. Those 2 days were the longest of an already difficult month. The anonymous accusations moved through the company the way any sharp piece of information moves through an enclosed social ecosystem. Fast, and in ways that were technically invisible but practically everywhere. She could see it in the slight hesitation before some colleagues greeted her. In the meeting rooms that went quiet a beat too late when she entered. In the 3 invitations to work lunches that did not come in a week when 2 of them normally would have. She kept working. She was always going to keep working. But on the second evening, sitting in her apartment with the lights low and a book open in her lap that she had not read a single page of in 40 minutes, something in her chest cracked open slightly, and she sat very still and felt the exhaustion of it. The real exhaustion. Not just the current situation, the accumulation. The years of being precise and diligent and careful. The years of building quietly and being good at what she did without ever drawing unnecessary attention. The years of asking for nothing more than fairness. And still, somehow, repeatedly arriving at this same destination. A room full of people who had already decided, and her voice too small to reach anyone. She thought about calling him. She didn't. She sat with it alone, because some things needed to be felt alone before they could be shared, and she had always known the difference. At 10:40 that night, a message came through the platform. It said, "Are you all right?" She looked at it for a moment. Then she typed back, "Not entirely." His response, "I know. I'm sorry this landed on you again." Her response, "It's not your fault." His, "Some of it is. Indirectly. I'll explain everything soon. Tonight, is there anything I can do?" She stared at the screen. She thought about what she needed, which was something she was not practiced at identifying, because she had spent most of her adult life deciding what she needed was irrelevant compared to what the task in front of her required. She typed, "Just stay. Talk to me for a while." He replied within seconds, "I'm here." They talked until almost 1 a.m. Not about any of it. Not the accusations or the investigation or the anonymous messages. About other things. He told her about the city he had been living in before he came back. The particular quality of winter there. The small restaurant near his apartment where the owner knew his order and never asked. She told him about Angola. The coast. The light over the Atlantic in the mornings. The way sound traveled differently there, slower, as if the air itself was less hurried. They talked like two people who had nowhere more important to be. Like two people who had, without exactly choosing it, become essential to each other's landscape. 2 days later, he asked her to come to his office. Not a meeting. Not a briefing. He asked her personally in a message, late enough in the day that the floor was mostly empty. She came. He was standing near the window when she arrived. Not the chairman's composed executive posture, but something slightly less certain. She noticed it immediately because she had never seen it before. "Sit down," he said. And then, before she could, "Please." She sat. He turned from the window. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to let me finish before you respond." "All right." He sat across from her, not behind the desk but in the chair beside it, at the same level. That choice registered. "The investigation found the payment to Park Soo-jin," he said. "A private transfer, structured to obscure the origin. My investigators traced it through 4 shell accounts over 6 weeks." He paused. "It traces back to a holding company registered in the name of my uncle, Kang Jae-Hyun. He is the largest minority shareholder in this company after me, and he has been in a years-long dispute with my branch of the family over the direction of the company's international portfolio." Sophia was very still. "He wanted me out of the overseas role," Jae-Hyun continued. "The expansion I have been managing has significantly increased my standing within the company structure, which threatens the leverage he holds as a minority stakeholder. His strategy was to create a crisis at headquarters, something that would require my immediate return and destabilize my management position." He stopped. "You were not the target, Sophia. The crisis was the target. You were simply someone he identified as useful for building it, a well-regarded employee whose sudden fall would generate board attention and media risk. Someone whose termination, framed as misconduct, would require executive intervention and drag the chairman's office into crisis management." He looked at her. "You were chosen deliberately because you had done nothing wrong. Because your reputation was clean and your termination would be visible, and the contrast between your actual record and the accusation would be exactly dramatic enough to create the kind of internal disruption he needed." The silence in the room was absolute. Sophia looked at her hands, then at the window, then back at him. "He used me to destabilize you." "Yes. And he had no way to know that we would meet." "No. None of this was in anyone's plan. None of it." She stood up slowly. She walked to the window and stood there with her back to him for a moment, looking at the city. "I lost 4 months," she said quietly. "I lost my reputation. I lost the ability to walk into a building I had worked in for 4 years without every person in the room making a decision about me before I could speak." "Yes." His voice was low. "And the person who arranged it has never faced any consequence." "Not yet." She turned. "What does that mean?" He looked at her steadily. There was something in his expression that she had seen before. The look of someone who has already made a decision and is now simply telling you about it. "It means I have submitted the evidence to the board this afternoon. Full documentation. Every transfer, every shell account, every instruction traceable to my uncle's communications. The board is convening an emergency session in 4 days." He paused. "He will be removed as a shareholder. His stake will be purchased out at a valuation he will not like, under terms he has no legal standing to contest. He will be formally severed from every business interest connected to this company, and the record of why will be permanently attached to the transaction." Sophia held his gaze. "And the anonymous message to the board about us?" Also addressed. I submitted a formal statement to the full board this morning, before the evidence presentation, disclosing our acquaintance prior to my return and clarifying the sequence of events. Every board member now has a complete timeline showing that the investigation was ordered before any personal contact, that our meeting was independent of any professional decision, and that every finding in the investigation is independently verifiable. I have also asked Director Yoon to coordinate a formal internal communication to staff, correcting the record regarding the anonymous accusations. He stood. I am not going to let someone use you to get to me, and then leave you to absorb the residue of it. That is not something I'm willing to do. She looked at him for a long moment. You declared yourself to the board, she said. About us? Yes. That puts you in a difficult position. I've been in difficult positions before. He said it without drama. I'd rather be in a difficult, honest position than a comfortable, dishonest one. Something shifted in the room. Not dramatically. Not with music or weather. Just a quiet, fundamental shift. The kind that happens when two people have said enough true things to each other that there's nothing left to perform. She crossed the distance between them slowly. He stayed still, completely still, as she came to stand in front of him. She looked up at his face. This face she had studied through glass and through phone screens and across conference tables. This face that was always, in every context, the same face. Jae-Hyun. Her voice was quiet. Yes, I'm going to need some time, she said. To process everything. The uncle. The board statement. All of it. Take all the time you need. But I want you to know something while I take that time. He waited. I'm not afraid of this, she said. Whatever this is between us. I'm not afraid of it anymore. Something happened in his expression. The stillness cracked just slightly. Just enough. Okay, he said. His voice was steadier than his expression. Okay, she repeated. She took a step back. Then she picked up her bag from the chair and walked to the door. At the threshold she paused. The restaurant near your old apartment, she said. The owner who knew your order. He looked at her. What did you always order? The smallest pause. And then, for the first time in the office, a real smile. Not the composed almost smile from the ball. Not the professional acknowledgement from across a conference table, but the actual one. Warm and genuine and slightly tired around the edges. The way real smiles are when they come from somewhere that matters. Galbajim, he said. Every time. She smiled back. Small real. That's a good order, she said. Then she left. The board session 4 days later was not public, but its outcome moved through the company in hours. Kang Jae-Hyun's removal was confirmed. The shareholder buyout terms were announced to internal leadership. The formal staff communication restoring Sophia's full professional reputation, naming the source of the anonymous accusations and documenting their falsity, went out on a Friday morning. She read it at her desk with her coffee going cold beside her. Then she went back to work. The months that followed were not simple. Nothing that had happened could be made simple by a board announcement or a corrected record. There were still colleagues who required time. There was still the industry reputation to rebuild. The external professional world had heard various versions of the original story, and correcting a narrative that had already traveled is slower than any formal statement can be. There were still mornings when she sat at her desk and felt the weight of all of it, not as a collapse but as a presence, a reminder of what a person's career could be made to look like when someone with resources and motive decided to use it. But there was also this. Jae-Hyun, on a Tuesday evening in late autumn, standing outside her building with 2 cups of takeaway coffee and no advance warning, asking if she wanted to walk. They walked for an hour, through streets going gold with the last of the season's leaves, past the illuminated windows of restaurants and the sound of other people's evenings. He did not hold her hand. He did not try to close any distance she had not already invited. He simply walked beside her, steady and unhurried, the way he moved through every space, as if he had decided where he wanted to be and had no intention of being anywhere else. She told him about a project she was working on. He told her about a decision the board had finalized that week. They talked about whether the city was better in autumn or spring, and were unable to reach consensus and agreed to revisit the question in spring. At the corner near her building, they stopped. Same time next week, he asked. She looked at him. The lights from the street caught the angles of his face, and he was looking at her with the same quality of attention he had used at a window at a masked ball. as if she was exactly as interesting as he had expected and somehow still surprising him. Same time, she said. The weeks became their rhythm. Walks and takeaway coffee, and occasionally a proper dinner at a quiet restaurant where neither of them was likely to be recognized by anyone who would care to report it. Long phone calls, messages at late hours. The gradual, unhurried architecture of two people building a life in the spaces between their lives. He was careful with her in a way she had not known how to ask for, but recognized immediately as what she had needed. He did not push past any boundaries she had established. He did not interpret her silences as invitations. When she pulled back, and she did pull back twice in moments of exhaustion and old fear, he gave her the space without making her feel that the space was a wound. He said once when she apologized for going quiet for almost a week, "You don't need to apologize for the way you take care of yourself. I'm still here." She had thought about that sentence for 3 days. On a Sunday in early winter, 8 months after she had returned to the company, 14 months after a masked ball where two strangers had stood at a window and talked about nothing and everything, he asked her something. They were in her apartment. She had cooked. He had brought wine and the news that Kang Jae-Hyun's legal team had filed and then withdrawn a challenge to the shareholder buyout, which meant everything was fully settled and would not resurface. They were sitting at her small dining table with the remains of the meal between them and the city visible through the window behind him. He put down his glass. "I want to ask you something," he said. "And I want you to know that whatever you answer, it doesn't change anything between us. I mean that." She set down her own glass. "Ask." "I would like to take you somewhere," he said. "Angola. Luanda. I'd like to meet your family, if they're willing to meet me. And I'd like it to be clear when we go what this is. Between us." She looked at him. He looked back. Not performing certainty. Actually certain, which was different. "You want to meet my mother," she said. "Yes. You understand what that means in my family." "I have some understanding," he said carefully. "I'm prepared to understand more." The corner of her mouth moved. "She's going to interrogate you for approximately 4 hours, Sophia said. "I expect so. She's going to make you eat things you won't recognize. I'm looking forward to it." She looked at him for a long moment. At his face, which she knew now in all its versions, professional, private, amused, certain, careful. At the hands she had first noticed at the masked ball, resting still on the table. At the hooded eyes that were watching her with the same quality of full attention they had always given her, from the very first evening. "Okay," she said. He released a breath, small, controlled, but she heard it. "Okay," he said. They went in February. Her mother, Esperanca, was a small, precise woman with her daughter's eyes and the particular authority of someone who has built everything they have with their own hands and knows it. She met Jae-Hyun at the door of the family home in Luanda with a look that lasted about 6 full seconds. An inventory, thorough and unconcealed, and then said in accented but perfectly functional English, "You're taller than I expected. Come in." He came in. The 4 hours were closer to 6. Esperanca asked about his family, his intentions, his professional ethics, his understanding of her daughter's career, and whether he believed a woman's professional identity was her own or something held in partnership with whoever she was with. He answered everything directly and without defensiveness. At some point during hour 3, Sophia looked across the table and found her mother watching him with an expression she recognized. The particular approval Esperanca never stated verbally, but always made visible, in the slight relaxation of her posture, the way her voice lost its interrogative edge. On the last evening, sitting on the terrace with the Atlantic visible in the distance, Esperanca sat beside her daughter while Jae-Hyun was inside helping with the dishes, which he had insisted on without prompting. "He believed you," her mother said quietly. "Before he had a reason to." Sophia looked at the ocean. "Yes. That kind of person is rare." Esperanca paused. "Your father believed me once, before he had a reason to. That's how I knew." Sophia did not say anything. "Don't be slow about it," her mother added. "You've spent enough years being careful about the wrong things." They were married 11 months later, in a ceremony that split the difference between two cultures with the particular beautiful awkwardness of families who love their children enough to learn new things for them. His family came from Seoul. Her family came from Luanda. There were traditional Korean formalities. The paebik ceremony, the handbox, the formal bowing between families, followed by Angolan celebration that lasted until 2 in the morning and involved dancing that Jae-Hyun participated in with the same calm, deliberate willingness he applied to everything, and which made her mother cry with actual happiness. He was not perfect. He was, in the ways that mattered, still the man from the ball. Measured, private, occasionally so controlled that she had to remind him that she was not made of glass and could handle the full weight of his thoughts. They learned each other's difficult edges the way people do in real relationships. Slowly, imperfectly, with occasional friction and frequent repair. But he was consistent. In every space. At every hour. In every version of the life they were building. 3 years after a masked ball. 2 years after a conference room where no one believed her. Sophia sat in the kitchen of their apartment on a Saturday morning with the newspaper and her coffee and the particular morning quiet of a home that felt like a home. Jae-Hyun was still asleep. He was not a morning person, which she had found out exactly 1 week into living together and found endlessly funny given his executive composure at all other hours. On the counter was an envelope from her former university in Angola, informing her that a scholarship fund she had quietly established in the previous year for young African women pursuing business and economics careers abroad, had received its first 3 recipients. She looked at the letter for a long time. Then she got up and made a second cup of coffee. And she went to wake him up. Thank you for staying until the end of this story. It means everything. Now I need to ask you a few things, because this story gave us a lot to think about. Who do you think was really wrong here? The colleague who pulled the trigger, the uncle who arranged everything, or the company that didn't give Sophia 5 minutes of genuine doubt? Was there a moment when you felt Kang Jae-Hyun went too far? Or did he not go far enough? And what hit you hardest? The moment she was walked out of that building, the moment she heard his voice across a conference room, or the moment her mother gave her approval in 3 quiet sentences? Tell me in the comments. Drop your country. Tell me what emotion this story left in your chest. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now, because the next story is already built, and it is going to hit even harder than this one. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear a story about being believed before you've proven yourself. And as always, drop a name in the comments. African, Korean, any name you love. Your name might be the next one that changes everything.